Hi friends, Miss Abate here. Okay, today we are going to be doing a new read aloud. Okay, so this read aloud is going to have a new essential question, and it's going to be a new genre, well, a newer genre. Okay, so let's first go ahead and get into it. Two things that you need: something to write with and something to write on. So make sure you have those two things, and we'll get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with everybody, and we will discuss the new text. Moving really slow. Sorry about this, friends. All right, so our new text today, our new read aloud that we're going to do is called A Prairie Guard Dog. Okay, so you can see here at the top that the genre is a narrative nonfiction. So while we have done narrative nonfictions before, I feel like it has been a while since we've done them. So if you remember, nonfiction means it is true. Okay, so this is a true text. And narrative means it's told in a type of a story way. Okay, so it's not, it's going to be told with some excitement, some sentences describing things. It's not going to be all about facts. Okay, but you will read a lot of facts and new information about prairie dogs. Okay, so we're going to be focused on today, what are features of different animal habitats, meaning where they live, right? So we're going to read to learn about a place a prairie dog calls home. Now, I want you to be looking at these prairie dogs, and like I said, we are going to be learning about where they live. So I want you to think about, do we have prairie dogs here where we live based on their habitat? Okay, so that's one question I want you to think about is, do we have prairie dogs here where we live? Okay, based on the habitat, the text, what the text says about where prairie dogs live. And two, if they don't live where we live, what kind of animal do they look like that we may have here? All right, so let's get started with our reading and learn some fun information about prairie dogs. Here we go. It's going to be difficult.
I am on a journey. My trip is to a prairie. It is in the outdoor world called nature. Many animals live in a prairie habitat. This place has what prairie dogs need to survive. A prairie has a lot of grasses, but few trees. Without places to hide, a prairie can be dangerous for some animals. Good morning. It is early in the morning. First, I see a prairie dog. I name him Pete. He peeks his head out of his burrow underground. He looks around. Then Pete calls loudly to his family. Yip! He lets them know it is safe to come out. Soon 4 prairie dogs come out. Prairie dogs build underground burrows to keep themselves safe from predators.
Okay, so we're just going to pause right here really quickly. So we did learn a little bit about where prairie dogs live. Can you reread the text and think about what we read that might tell us where prairie dogs live or the kind of environment they live in? So, right, it is called a prairie habitat. Right, but what is prairie habitat? It says a prairie has lots of grasses, but few trees. Okay, so does that sound like where we live? So no, don't think about where maybe your house is or where the school is, but think about our city, our state, okay? Outside, other neighborhoods, other places near us. Does that sound like us where there's not very many trees? Let's keep reading to find out if we can find any similarities or differences between our habitat and their habitat. Okay, here we go.
Pete is the guard, and he is restless. He cannot rest because he is always looking around for danger. This allows the other prairie dogs to safely munch on grasses and seeds. They can also groom each other or work on their burrow. Yap, yap! Prairie dogs can make 11 different sounds to communicate with each other.
Being real funky today.
A scare. Oh no! Pete spies a large badger. When he sees it, he gives a loud bark. Yap, yap! His family recognizes the warning. Some hide in tall grasses, and some jump into the burrow. The badger runs at Pete, but the watchful guard is able to escape into the burrow. I am glad he is able to get away from danger. After a few minutes, Pete peeks his head out again, and he is back on the job. Badgers live on prairies and hunt prairie dogs.
Okay, so why can't Pete rest? What did the text say about why Pete can't rest? Right, it says that he is restless, but why is he restless? The second sentence says he cannot rest because he is always looking around for danger. Now, what danger might prairie dogs face did we just read about? Yeah, other predators such as this badger right here. So this badger, it might be like a predator to these prairie dogs. It's what I'm thinking from reading this text. Now, what does Pete do to help his family or to help the other groundhog? I say groundhogs. What does Pete do to help the other prairie dogs? Yeah, he's like a guard dog, right? A guard prairie dog. And he yips and yaps and barks to let them know if they're safe to come out or not, or if there's danger. Okay, so let's keep reading.
Break time. The sun gets higher, and it is hot now. The prairie dogs slip into their deep burrow where it is cooler. Even Pete goes in. Tunnels like hallways lead to different areas. There is a sleeping room. There is a room used like a bathroom. The prairie dogs cover up roots and seeds in one room. Later, they eat the buried food there.
It's very interesting. So here we get a better look at their habitat, right? Even though this is a drawing, this is an illustration, we get a better look at what their habitat looks like. So we can see that really in the landscape, the far distance, you don't see anything but really flat land and like brown and green grass. Even here off in the distance, it almost looks like desert mountains, right? So it doesn't really look like there's a whole lot of trees and shrubs. So be thinking about, is that really something, is that similar or different to where we live? Does that look like where we live or does that look different? Okay. So I also love that these prairie dogs build their own rooms, right? They don't get to just go into a neighborhood and say, oh, I want that place with all of these rooms. They knew that they wanted to keep their bathroom separate from where they ate and where they slept. And that's not very common for most animals to do that. So this is like a really cool thing that I like learning about prairie dogs when I read this text, is that they have different rooms. Okay, so let's keep reading.
Second shift. I keep watching the burrow. Finally, the sun begins to set and a different prairie dog peeks its head out. I name him Gary. Pete must be off duty. Yip, Gary calls. The other prairie dogs come back out. The prairie dogs eat and play until the moon is high in the sky. Then they go to sleep in their burrows. I wonder if Pete will be back on duty. I will see in the morning.
Okay, so second shift. I like this. I think this was also a really interesting fact about prairie dogs, is he said that he saw another prairie dog being a guard dog, that Pete must have gone and done something else, and now they had a prairie dog on a second shift. So that's like if you know your families are working as like a nurse or something, and they leave to come home. Well, obviously the hospital doesn't shut down because they leave, right? So somebody else comes in and takes over their shift, takes over their work. So that way everything moves nice and slow. Or excuse me, I am having a lot of trouble speaking today, so I apologize. So everything works nice and smoothly when you have different people coming in, so that way others can rest. Because even though it's a prairie dog, Well, we know that animals, most of them still need to sleep and they need to eat and, all of that stuff. So Pete is no different. Pete is the guard dog, but, maybe they have different prairie dogs that have different types of responsibilities and jobs, just like we do, to keep their environment and their community safe. So that's very interesting.
Dog facts. Size 12 to 15 inches tall. Weight 2 to 4 pounds. Habitat short and medium grass desert prairies. Food roots, seeds, leaves of plants, grasses. Shelter underground burrows with many rooms. Predators coyotes, bobcats, badgers, foxes, weasels.
So that was just a really quick summary of a lot of stuff that we did already read about in pictures and illustrations, okay? So now what I want you guys to do is I want you to first think about, what do these prairie dogs look like that we may have? Because I think that we just kind of came to the realization that I don't think prairie dogs live where we do. I think they live in a different habitat, okay? And that's going to be a different point of topic for us to talk about in just a second. But so knowing that prairie dogs don't live where we do, what do you think they look like? What kind of animal do we have around here that we see that they may look like? Okay, so they could look like a squirrel right here, this little face, but squirrels aren't 12 to 15 inches tall. So 12 to 15 inches, the size of a ruler, a little bit taller than a ruler. Squirrels typically aren't that big, but what else could they look like? Yeah, they look like groundhogs. So we have groundhogs, very common where we are. So we may think that we're seeing a prairie dog, but we are seeing a groundhog. Okay, so now what I want you guys to do is, knowing that prairie dogs don't live in the same habitat that we do, I want you to write down, what are two features of a prairie dog's habitat that we just learned about? Meaning, what are two things, two types of descriptions about where they live, about their habitat? Looking at the text, what the text said, looking at these illustrations about what their habitat looks like, and thinking about really how it's different from ours. Okay, so I want you guys to go ahead and do that. So pause the video, get that written down. Okay. All right, what are some things that you guys said? So Tex said that they live in short, medium grass. Okay. Well, yes, we do have short and medium grass here too, but we don't live in a desert. And that's where it says they live, something called a desert prairie. Okay. Something from looking at the pictures, it looks flat. It looks dry. It could be a feature of the habitat, looks dry. And we know that deserts are fairly dry. And if we go back to the beginning of the text as well, we talked about that it didn't have a lot of trees. It had very few trees, but a lot of grass. Okay. And maybe we could talk about what the ground looks like. Maybe it looks like sandy. It looks like dirt. It looks, again, dry. Okay. All right, friends. So I hope you had a really nice time listening to this text about prairie dogs. Hope you learned a lot about them and you enjoyed that. And I will see you guys next time. Have a great day.